What happens when two powerhouse voices collide? It's bound to create sparks, but no one could have predicted just how uncomfortable things would get when Teddy Swims appeared on the Kelly Clarkson Show. What began as a warm, friendly interview quickly spiraled into one of the most awkward and talked about moments in daytime television history. The studio lights were blazing as Kelly settled into her signature chair, her trademark smile shining as she welcomed Teddy to the stage. Across from her, Teddy adjusted his seat on the plush interview couch, his tattooed hands fidgeting slightly with the mic clipped to his shirt. The audience buzzed with anticipation, completely unaware that they were about to witness live TV history in the making. So, Teddy, Kelly began brightly, her voice carrying that easy southern warmth that made her such a beloved host. Your rise to fame has been absolutely incredible. From posting covers in your bedroom to selling out arenas, it's like a fairy tale come true. Teddy's jaw tightened ever so slightly, though his polite smile didn't fade. "Well, Kelly, I appreciate that," he replied evenly, "but I wouldn't exactly call it a fairy tale. There's been a lot of hard work, a lot of rejection, and a lot of people who didn't believe in me." Kelly nodded enthusiastically, missing the subtle edge in his tone. "Absolutely. But that's what makes it so inspiring. You went from being this unknown guy to having millions of views almost overnight. It must feel amazing to finally get the recognition you deserve." The word finally hung in the air like a spark about to ignite something volatile. Teddy's smile faltered before he caught himself. "I mean, I've been doing this for over a decade." "Kelly, it wasn't overnight hand. It was never about getting recognition I deserved. It was about staying true to my art, whether anyone was paying attention or not." Kelly laughed lightly, though it sounded slightly forced through the studio speakers. "Right, of course," she said quickly. "But you have to admit, social media really changed everything for you. Without platforms like TikTok and Instagram, would we even know who Teddy Swims is?" The question landed like a slap. Teddy's posture straightened, and for the first time, the easy, media-trained charm began to crack. "Are you suggesting my success is just because of social media algorithms?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but dangerous. "No, not at all," Kelly said, backpedaling with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm just saying that social media gave you a platform that maybe traditional routes didn't. Let's be honest. The music industry can be tough for artists who don't fit the typical mold." Teddy's eyes narrowed. "What mold would that be exactly?" he asked, his tone low and warning. Kelly, perhaps unaware of the growing tension, pressed on. "You know, the whole tattooed, bearded, soulful guy thing. It's very trendy right now. Very authentic feeling, even if it's carefully crafted for social media consumption." The audience's laughter and chatter died instantly, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that hung heavy in the air. Even the camera operators seemed to shift uneasily behind their equipment. "Carefully crafted," Teddy repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, but filled with weight. "Kelly, these tattoos aren't a marketing strategy. This beard isn't a brand choice. This is who I am, and I've been this way long before anyone gave a damn about authenticity." Kelly's smile wavered, and she threw a nervous glance toward her producers offstage. "Of course, Teddy, I didn't mean it that way. I think what our viewers would love to know is how you keep that authentic connection with your fans while managing the pressures of sudden fame." Sudden fame, Teddy said, shaking his head slowly. "You keep using words like that as if I just appeared out of thin air with a guitar and a dream. Do you have any idea how many dive bars I played to 5 people? How many times I was told my voice was too soulful for country, too R&B for rock?" Kelly tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "I'm sure it was challenging," she said diplomatically. "But speaking of your voice, let's talk about your latest album. The production is so polished compared to your early bedroom recordings. It must be nice working with a real team of professionals. Asterisk, that was the moment everything shattered. Teddy's eyes darkened, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. A real team of professionals. He repeated, his voice cold. As opposed to what, Kelly? The fake amateurs I was working with before. The studio fell completely silent. Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Teddy unclipped his mic, set it gently on the table, and stood up. Without another word, he turned and walked off the set, leaving Kelly sitting frozen in her chair, her polished smile gone. The audience didn't know whether to clap or gasp. It was a moment no one saw coming, one that would be replayed, analyzed, and debated for months to come. I just meant that having access to proper studios and experienced producers must have elevated your sound significantly, Kelly said, her tone smoothing into something rehearsed and polite. There's nothing wrong with getting help to reach your full potential. Help to reach my full potential, Teddy repeated, his voice low but sharp, every word coated with restrained anger. Let me ask you something, Kelly. When you won American Idol, did people tell you that Simon Cowell and the show's production team helped you reach your full potential, or did they recognize that the talent was already there? The comparison landed hard. Kelly blinked, momentarily thrown off balance, her usual confidence faltering. That's different, Teddy, she stammered. American Idol is a competition show. It's designed to find and showcase existing talent. Teddy leaned forward slightly, his expression hardening. And what do you think I was doing in those dive bars and bedroom recordings, playing hide and seek? I was showcasing my talent to anyone who would listen, for years. Before any algorithm or professional team or fairy tale moment you want to romanticize. His voice was rising now, no longer hiding the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. The studio audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something real and volatile was unfolding before them. Kelly's media instincts kicked in as she tried to regain control of the conversation. Teddy, I think there might be a misunderstanding here, she said carefully, her voice taking on a placating tone. I have nothing but respect for your journey and your talent. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. But Teddy wasn't buying it. No, Kelly, he shot back, his voice steady but edged with heat. I think we got off on exactly the foot you intended. You brought me here thinking you could package my story into some feel-good segment about social media success and professional polish without bothering to understand what that story actually is. The air in the studio had grown heavy, the kind of silence that makes every movement feel amplified. Camera operators exchanged uncertain glances as conflicting signals came from the control booth. Audience members looked at each other with wide eyes, unsure whether to intervene or simply sit and witness. Kelly Clarkson, confident, unflappable, seasoned host, suddenly looked like she was grasping for solid ground that wasn't there. I think what our audience would really benefit from, she said, her voice slightly shaky now, is hearing about your creative process and how you choose which songs to record. Teddy let out a short, humorless laugh. My creative process, he repeated. My creative process is taking every rejection, every dismissal, every person who looked at me and decided I didn't fit their idea of what a musician should look like, and turning that pain into something beautiful. My creative process is being authentic in a world that's constantly trying to sell you a version of authenticity. Kelly's face was flushed now, her composure visibly slipping. Teddy, I understand you're passionate about your music, she said, her tone straining to remain professional. But I think you might be misinterpreting my questions. Am I? Teddy leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you think my success is some combination of lucky timing, social media manipulation, and professional intervention. It sounds like you can't quite believe that someone who looks like me with my background could actually have something real to offer. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sounds were the low hum of studio equipment and the occasional nervous cough from the audience. This was no longer an interview, it was a confrontation, raw and unfiltered. Kelly's expression hardened, and for the first time in the segment, the mask of polished charm slipped away completely. "Teddy, I think you're being unfair," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I've interviewed hundreds of artists, and I've always been supportive of different paths to success." Supportive. Teddy's tone was incredulous. "Kelly, in the last 10 minutes, you've implied that my success is accidental. My authenticity is manufactured. My early work was amateur, and my talent needed professional intervention to be worthwhile. If that's your idea of supportive, I'd hate to see what you consider hostile." The audience was utterly still, hanging on every word. A few phones were discreetly lifted as people began recording. Sensing they were witnessing something explosive, something that would go viral before the day was over. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically signaling for a commercial break. But neither Kelly nor Teddy seemed to notice. Kelly's voice grew sharper, the tension twisting her words. "I'm trying to have a conversation about your career trajectory, Teddy. If you're going to take every question as a personal attack, maybe you're not ready for this level of media attention." The sentence hit the studio like an explosion. Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the crew seemed to freeze. Teddy's eyes widened slightly, the calm before the storm. "Not ready for this level of media attention," he repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. "Let me get this straight. Kelly, you think I'm not ready for media attention? Because I won't sit here and let you diminish everything I've worked for." Kelly seemed to realize she'd gone too far, but instead of backing down, she pressed on. "I think artists who want to succeed at this level need to be able to handle tough questions and different perspectives without getting defensive," she said firmly, trying to reassert control. "Tough questions," Teddy repeated, his tone dark and deliberate, as the crowd collectively held its breath, knowing this was the breaking point. Teddy stood up from the couch, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the interview setup. "Kelly asking me about my music, my influences, my writing process, those would be tough questions," he said, his tone sharp. "But what you've been doing is trying to rewrite my story to fit whatever narrative makes you comfortable." Kelly remained seated, her posture rigid, but her voice calm. "I'm trying to help our viewers understand your journey, Teddy. Sometimes that means asking questions that might not be what you want to hear." Teddy laughed bitterly. "Help our viewers understand. Or help yourself understand how someone like me could succeed without going through the same system that validated you." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Kelly's expression shifted rapidly from shock to anger to something close to panic. "That's completely out of line. Teddy, is it?" she managed, her tone defensive. Teddy began pacing, his movements charged with emotion. "Because from where I stand, seems like you can't wrap your head around the fact that there are artists out there who didn't need a television competition, who didn't need industry gatekeepers, who didn't need permission from people like you to make music that matters." Kelly's voice rose to match his. "People like me. What is that supposed to mean?" "It means people who think success has to look a certain way," Teddy shot back. "People who believe it has to come through certain channels, be approved by certain institutions. It means people who are so invested in their own version of how things should work that they can't see talent when it doesn't fit their predetermined mold." The studio crackled with tension. Audience members shifted uneasily in their seats, some inching toward the exits, others frozen, watching the verbal collision unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Even the show's usually light-hearted band members sat upright, silent and watchful, as if awaiting orders. Kelly's composure was beginning to unravel. "You know what, Teddy?" she said sharply. "I've been doing this show for years. I've made artists feel welcome. I've celebrated their success. I've given them a platform to share their stories. If you can't appreciate that, maybe the problem isn't with my questions." Teddy stopped pacing, turning to face her directly. "Make artists feel welcome. Kelly, you've spent this entire interview trying to convince me and everyone watching that my success is somehow illegitimate, that my authenticity is fake, that my talent isn't real without professional polish. If that's your idea of making someone feel welcome, I'd hate to be your enemy." Kelly jumped to her feet, her patience gone. "You're putting words in my mouth, Teddy. I never said any of those things." "You didn't have to say them directly," Teddy snapped. "Every question was designed to undermine something. Every comment was loaded with the assumption that I'm somehow less legitimate than artists who came up through traditional channels. That's paranoid and ridiculous." Kelly's voice echoed through the studio. "I ask similar questions to all my guests about their journey and their process. Do you?" Teddy's eyes blazed. "Do you ask Taylor Swift if her success is just because of social media algorithms? Do you ask John Legend if his early work was too amateur before professional producers touched it? Do you ask any of your mainstream pop guests if they're not ready for media attention when they push back on your characterizations?" Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but faltered. "That's not a fair comparison, and you know it." Teddy's voice was sharp and steady. "Why isn't it fair, Kelly?" "Because they fit your idea of what a successful artist looks like. Because their path to success makes sense to you in a way that mine doesn't." The producers behind the cameras were gesturing wildly now, desperate to end the chaos, but both Kelly and Teddy seemed locked in their confrontation, deaf to everything around them. The audience could feel the air thick with discomfort, watching what felt like the total collapse of daytime television's polished facade. Kelly's voice shook as she tried to regain control. "Now you're being incredibly unprofessional, Teddy. This is supposed to be a celebration of your success, not an attack on my integrity as a host." Teddy's voice dropped low, almost a growl. "Unprofessional. Kelly, you've spent the last 20 minutes systematically attacking everything about my career, my authenticity, my readiness for success, and you want to lecture me about professionalism." "I have not attacked anything," Kelly protested weakly. "I've asked legitimate questions about your career." Teddy's laugh was sharp. "Legitimate questions? Like whether I'm just a social media creation? Like whether my music needed professional intervention to be worthwhile? Like whether I'm ready for this level of attention?" His voice rose with each accusation. Kelly's face flushed red, her frustration boiling over. "You're twisting everything I said. Am I?" Teddy gestured toward the audience, many of whom were nodding in agreement. "Because I think everyone here heard exactly what you said and how you said it." Kelly's eyes darted around the studio, searching for support, but met only uneasy expressions and averted gazes. Even her production team seemed to be quietly backing away from the spectacle. "This is my show, Teddy," Kelly finally said, her voice tight and controlled. "I've been nothing but welcoming and supportive. And if you can't see that, maybe you should reconsider whether you want to be here." The words landed like a challenge. Teddy stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The room was so silent that the faint hum of the air conditioner felt deafening. "You know what, Kelly?" he said finally, his voice calm but cold. "Maybe I should reconsider." The sentence hit like a death blow. Kelly's eyes widened, realizing what he meant, but her pride wouldn't let her soften. "Teddy, don't be dramatic. We can work through this." "Work through what, Kelly?" "Your complete inability to respect what I've accomplished. Your need to tear down my story so it fits your comfortable narrative." Teddy began unhooking his microphone, every motion slow and deliberate. Kelly's voice cracked slightly, desperation creeping in. "Teddy, please, you're misunderstanding my intentions. I brought you here because I believe in your talent." Teddy paused, looking at her with something between pity and disgust. "You brought me here because I'm trending, Kelly. You wanted the buzz. The views? Don't confuse that with believing in my talent." Kelly shook her head, her voice trembling. "That's not true. I genuinely wanted to share your story with my audience." Teddy gave a hollow laugh. "My story? Kelly, you haven't asked me a single question about my actual story. You haven't asked about the music that saved my life." Asterisk, the studio was still. No applause. No laughter. Just silence and the heavy realization that something irreversible had just happened. Not just an interview gone wrong, but a fracture in the carefully staged illusion of sincerity that daytime television was built on. The fans who supported me before anyone knew my name. The struggles that shaped every song I've ever written. You've been too busy trying to figure out how to diminish what I've built, Teddy said, his voice carrying through the stunned silence of the studio. The audience was transfixed, unable to look away from the escalating confrontation. Some clutched their phones, still recording what was quickly becoming a historic television moment, while others sat frozen in disbelief. Even the band members, usually relaxed during interviews, looked as if they were watching a natural disaster unfold in real time. Kelly's composure finally cracked. "I don't understand why you're being so hostile," she said, her voice shaking. "I've always been supportive of artists from all backgrounds." Asterisk backgrounds, Teddy repeated, his tone sharp as glass. "Kelly, you've made it crystal clear that you don't consider my background legitimate. Every question has been designed to explain away my success rather than celebrate it." Kelly's face tightened and she shot back. "I never said your background wasn't legitimate." But even she seemed to realize how hollow her defense sounded. Teddy freed his microphone from his shirt and looked at her steadily. "You didn't have to say it. When you suggest that social media is the only reason people know who I am, you're saying my music isn't good enough to stand on its own. When you imply that my early work needed professional polish to be worthwhile, you're saying I wasn't talented enough without help. When you question whether I'm ready for media attention, you're saying I don't belong at this level." Asterisk Kelly glanced around desperately, as if someone might step in to rescue her, but the production team was frozen in place. "Teddy, I think you're reading too much into casual interview questions," she said weakly. "Casual?" Teddy's voice cracked with disbelief. "Kelly, there was nothing casual about the way you've conducted this interview. Every question was loaded, every comment designed to undermine. This wasn't an interview. It was an interrogation." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kelly's face cycled through emotions, frustration, guilt, anger, before she finally lashed out. "You know what, Teddy? Maybe this reaction is exactly why some people in the industry have concerns about working with you. Maybe this attitude is why you had to build your career outside traditional channels." Asterisk. The words hit like a thunderclap. The audience gasped, and even the camera operators seemed to freeze mid-motion. Teddy went still, his expression darkening into something deeper than anger. "There it is," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "There's the real Kelly Clarkson, not the supportive host, not the champion of artists, the one who thinks that questioning her narrative means there's something wrong with me." Kelly's face paled as she realized she'd crossed an irreversible line. "Teddy, I didn't mean that the way it sounded." She tried to recover, but he shook his head. "Yes, you did. You meant it exactly the way it sounded. You think that because I won't sit here and let you rewrite my story, because I won't pretend your dismissive questions are supportive, there must be something wrong with my attitude. You think the problem is me, not your inability to understand or respect what I represent." Asterisk Kelly's voice was barely audible now. "That's not what I think. Teddy's eyes locked on hers. "Isn't it? Because you just suggested that my reaction to your disrespect proves the industry was right to overlook me. You've just validated every gatekeeper who ever told me I wasn't good enough, every executive who said I didn't fit, every person who made me feel like I had to prove my worth. The room was dead silent, except for the faint hum of the equipment. Kelly looked like she wanted to sink into her chair, while the audience sat frozen, holding their breath. Teddy lifted the microphone he'd removed, turning it over in his hand like it was contaminated. "You know what the most insulting part of this is?" he said softly. "I actually respected you, Kelly. I thought you were different because you came from a competition show. I thought you understood what it was like to have your talent questioned. But you're just another industry insider who can't see past her own limited perspective." Teddy, please, Kelly pleaded, her voice breaking. "I made mistakes in this interview. Let me make it right." Teddy shook his head slowly. "Make it right. Kelly, you can't unmake the last 30 minutes. You can't unsay the things you've said or unthink the thoughts that made you say them. This interview showed me exactly who you are and exactly what you think of artists like me." He placed the microphone gently on the side table, as if setting down something fragile. "I came here expecting to talk to someone who understood the struggle, who appreciated the journey. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks my success is a fluke, and my authenticity is a marketing strategy." Kelly's voice trembled, desperation overtaking her professionalism. "Teddy, I swear that's not what I think. Please don't leave like this." He looked at her for a long, heavy moment, and when he finally spoke, his tone was no longer angry, just sad. "Kelly, the tragedy here isn't that you think these things about me. The tragedy is that you probably think them about a lot of artists who don't fit your narrow definition of legitimacy. How many other guests have sat in this chair and felt what I'm feeling right now?" "None," Kelly said quickly. "This has never happened before." Teddy gave a faint, humorless smile. "Maybe not. But maybe that's because other people were more willing to smile and nod while you diminished their achievements. Maybe they were more interested in being polite than being honest." He turned toward the audience, who were still in stunned silence, some holding up their phones to capture the moment. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this," he said, his voice steady. "But sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than being polite." Kelly made one last desperate plea. "Teddy, you're throwing away a huge opportunity here. This show reaches millions of people." Teddy paused at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time. "Kelly, I'd rather reach nobody than reach millions through someone who doesn't respect what I've built. My music speaks for itself, and it doesn't need validation from people who can't see its worth." With that, he walked off the set, leaving Kelly sitting alone beneath the harsh studio lights. The cameras kept rolling as she stared after him, her face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something close to regret. The audience didn't know whether to clap, boo, or sit in stunned silence. The producers scrambled behind the scenes, trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage, but it was too late. For the first time in her career, Kelly Clarkson was completely speechless. As Teddy disappeared through the studio exit, the weight of what had just happened settled over everyone present. It wasn't just a walk-off, it was a reckoning, a statement that would be replayed, analyzed, and debated for years. And to think, it all began with what Kelly thought would be a simple, supportive interview. The music industry would never look at either of them the same way again.